Out of the street corners they scream. You knew it was coming. You've been waiting for this for months. Rumour hardened into fear and now they scream at you. The sirens, their hysterical wail tearing through the white noise of the city. And you run. You run to pick up those things that can never be replaced. A picture of them in the days when they still loved you. Your mother's wedding ring. And then you turn to your shelf of games. You only have room for 5. 5 games for Doomsday. 5 Games for Doomsday is a show in which board game personalities are thrust into a cabin in the woods to outrun an oncoming disaster, but can only take 5 of their games with them. But which will they choose? My guest this week went from getting back into gaming to running and organising Britain's second biggest gaming convention. A former craft beer specialist and heavy metal musician, he found that there were no gaming conventions in his area, and rather than bemoan his luck, he started his own. Thus, Aire Con was born, which has grown hugely over the years it's been open. And recently, he also started work in the industry full-time with Hush Hush Games, the makers of Fog of Love. My guest this week is Mark Cooke. Mark, welcome to the cabin.
Thank you, yeah, it's good to be here.
So, to begin then, how difficult was it for you to pick the games that you want to take to the cabin with you?
Yeah, it's tough because as we go through them, they're definitely not like my top 5 games of all time. There's probably a couple in there that wouldn't even break my top 20. And so it's kind of a mixture of what did I want to take for sort of survival purposes and games that I'd want to play or had sentimental value, I suppose. So yeah, it definitely, I think I probably got it back to you quite quickly what I would like to take. But there was definitely a few iterations and I'd been going through in my head quite a lot.
And so, I mean, what are games to you? Do they, because I interviewed someone just a couple of days ago and they said, my criteria was it's my top 5 games and I'm just going to take those. And you said it's not the case. So do they hold sentimental value for you games as well as being things to play, things to use?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the games that I have in my collection are maybe ones based on places I've been to. They're almost just a way of telling stories, I think. Or some are, maybe they're not I don't really enjoy the game that much. It's a good game, but it's not, a great game perhaps, but I have great memories of playing that game with someone or with a group of people somewhere. So I'll hold on to it because, I think one day I might recreate that experience or, have a new experience with someone else. And I think that's, for me, it's much more about the experience of playing games with people that I really enjoy.
I mean, what draws you to a particular game? Are you someone goes by design? Are you someone who goes by theme? Are you someone who goes by the art on the front cover? Is there anything that particularly draws you in?
Yeah, definitely if it looks pretty, it'll get my attention. I'm not someone really that goes after a particular designer. There's certain designers that I know I like and I'll probably like a game if they put one out, but it's not something I chase. It is definitely, if something looks nice, it'll get my attention. Definitely judge a book by its cover. In that regard, even someone like Vincent Dutray, the artist, I would probably go for a game because he's done the art rather than what the game might be like. So yeah, it has to look nice. The graphic design has to be good, and good symbology and things like that to be able to. Because I think I like being immersed in the game, and so anything that jars with me, if I think something looks a bit weird or it's hard to understand that symbol, it'll pull me out of the game, and then that'll lessen my enjoyment of it.
And are you a hoarder? Because it sounds like, I mean, it's kind of the way I buy games too. I find myself having piles of games, some of which I never play because I buy them because they look lovely. And then afterwards I think, oh, what a mistake at a maker. I mean, do you sell on games after you realise they're terrible, or do they just take up more and more space in your home?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And for a while, I was in that place of I had piles of games everywhere. And then it was my wife, actually, that said, you can't just keep doing this. I don't have loads of opportunities to play games. So I definitely don't need a massive collection. So what we agreed was that I would have a certain amount of shelf space. When that gets full, I'm down to a 1-in, 1-out system. So, yeah, that certainly helps in terms of deciding what games to buy. I tend to take a part in a lot of sort of maths trades, where you can play a game for a little while and pass it on to someone else, which is a good way of cycling through games. But yeah, there's a limit to it, but I'll definitely still buy a lot of the new pretty stuff.
And how does it feel when you look at your game shelf? Because even though my games are not ordered, I haven't ordered them by colour or anything like this. When I look at my full game shelf and I look at the potentiality, I suppose, of what I can do with these games, it kind of makes me feel nice just to have them there. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, definitely. Just nice looking across the shelves. But I think there's still that connection. Like most of my games, I'm pretty good at not leaving games on my, as people call it, their shelf of shame. I prefer pile of potential, but they don't stay there for very long. I'm usually pretty good at getting them played at least once, but I definitely have that thing where most of my games have probably only been played once, maybe twice. But there's definite associations with the various different ones as I look across my shelves, and they're not particularly ordered in any kind of special way. It's just wherever they fit. so I can get around that shelf limit as much as possible by squeezing things into all gaps.
And how would it feel to know that you're sitting in a cabin with 5 games and the rest of your collection is burning up as the meteor hits Leeds? Yeah,
that would be sad. Like I think I've got enough. I've probably got about 120 odd games, I think, and so that's enough that I always know that there's something I could play. If I was down to 5, though, I would always be regretting, if only I had brought this game instead, or if that game had just made it or survived. It'd be tough, really tough.
And how do you think you deal with the apocalypse? Are you a practical person, or do you think you'd die in a fortnight?
I think I would be pretty good. Like it's a topic, weirdly, that my wife and I discuss quite frequently as we make our way up and down the A1 to our in-laws.
Are you a prepper?
Yeah, we have got some frozen Brexit milk in the freezer,
right,
and some bread and things like that. But I think it's more that we just have a plan. We know where we'll go. And we know what we're going to be grabbing first, like a can opener. That was one of our things that we'd always go for first.
And I assume you're not going to tell me for fear that the whole of Yorkshire will congregate at your escape hole.
Yeah. No, well, we have various ones just in case, you see. I think it depends on what kind of apocalyptic event it is. If it's zombies versus meteor, it's a very different response that you're going to have.
But hopefully you're not one of those crazy far-right survivalists.
No, we wouldn't go that far. No, I think it's just, for some reason, it's a thing that interests us as we're driving around. So we've come up with various different situations and scenarios that we're going to be escaping. I think that'll hold us in good stead.
If you had to live through a particular variety of the apocalypse, which would be your ideal one to live through?
Yeah, that'd be tough. I think where it's something natural if something known, I think would be easier. So something like a meteor where, it's come and it's happened and you're done and you're just dealing with the fallout of other humans. I think something like the bird box thing where you just never know, or, some kind of random plague or disease, I think would be much harder. I think a one-off kind of impact event would be my preferred apocalypse.
I'd have to go for zombies. They're my favourite. I think they're the classic. And, I'm nothing if not unimaginative.
I think it'd depend on the zombies.
Hopefully they're slow zombies. You don't want quick zombies because they really will eat you.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning then. So in your notes you sent me, you said that you were born into a gaming family. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm fairly confident there's sort of 2 types of families, a gaming family and a non-gaming family. So I'm from a gaming family where that would be a weekend activity for us. My mum would make things up to help us learn our spelling or learn our maths, or little treasure hunts around the house. Or we would play games when we went on holiday or at Christmas time, and we still do to this day. My wife is very much from a non-gaming family, so didn't really play any games, maybe had a dusty old copy of Cluedo or something. in the house that ever rarely saw the light of day. So it's definitely kind of ingrained from a young age where I'd play with my mum and my dad quite a lot. I would play with my nana quite a lot when I went to stay with her. So I think that's, it was just always, it was a normal thing for us to do, was to play games.
And what sort of games were you playing? I assume you weren't playing sort of Avalon Hill war games or anything.
Yeah, not back then. It would have been the kind of fairly standard kind of family fare of, Monopoly and Cluedo and Risk. I think we even had Stratego. I used to play a lot with my dad. Even, kind of compendiums. I remember various compendiums around the house of kind of checkers and chess and pick up sticks and all these kind of random games you'd get in those. Yeah.
And did the family have a card game of choice?
Yeah. I forget what it's called. So with my mum, it was, I think it's called Gin Rummy, where you kind of playing up and down and you have to declare how many hands you're going to get.
It's not. Gin Rummy is the one with 3 of 4, 3 of one,
yes.
4 of another.
Yeah, no, sorry. It's the one that you kind of have to declare how many hands you're going to get, and you go up, and there's a different trump card each round. And then with my nan, she used to love a game called Scabby Queen, which I'm not even sure I can remember how to play it, but I think it was based on something like Chase the Ace, but where you were trying not to have the Scabby Queen, and she had this big jar of pennies that she would dump out on the table, and you play with pennies. Yeah, so we do lots of different card games, and yeah, it was a good fun time.
And so you said that you were an army child and that you moved around a lot. I mean, sort of, where did you live? What kind of places did you live? And how was that as a kid? Was it difficult, or did you love the challenge of making new friends and meeting new people?
Yeah, whether it's difficult, it's hard to say, because I didn't know anything else. So it was every 2 years we had to move. So I was born in Germany. We lived there for a couple of years. We moved back to the UK for a couple of years. We went back to Germany for another 4 years.
So what did your dad do in the army then that necessitated him moving every 2 years?
That's just the way it is in the regiment he was in. He joined as a lad sort of the day after his 16th birthday, I think, and was in the army for over 20 years. But yeah, it's just how it was. And so, and you had friends that did the same. You didn't necessarily always move with them, but I remember, one particular friend, Gregory, that I knew from when I was very young. Didn't see him for a few years, and then we happened to move back to the same area, and I saw him again. And it was like that way until I went to secondary school, was when my dad left the army. And I was just kind of used to it, I guess. But yeah, you definitely had to do that thing of getting to know people very quickly. Yeah.
Oh, and what was the logistics of it? Just, where were you living? What sort of schools were you attending? So you said in your notes that you were in Germany and you learnt no German, although you lived there for years. Yeah,
so it's you kind of live on army bases. I think it's a bit different now. You can live in civilian homes, but we used to live on army bases, and but they were in army camps where you had your own shops. There were English schools with English speaking teachers. We rarely kind of spoke the language of wherever we were, and yeah, I started learning German at secondary school, even though I'd lived in Germany for 6 years previously, and it's a strange experience, kind of. Especially, I remember quite vividly walking around the town that we lived in at the time, Munster, and someone speaking to us in German, my brother and I. And I was really freaked out. I didn't know what they were saying. I didn't understand this weird language because I was just used to English all the time. Anyway, in my surroundings, like I said, the shop, even the pub, and the schools were all English speaking. So,
no, I think it's incredibly interesting. I live in Berlin, and it's sort of an English language curse in some ways, because it's wonderful because everyone speaks your language, but at the same time, if you're slightly predisposed to being lazy, you can get away with not learning the language. And I know people who've been here for years and don't speak a sentence of German, And but how is your German now? Are you good?
Probably terrible again. No, definitely not. I did enough to get past my GCSEs, and then I think it's, especially in Europe, in a lot of countries, they as soon as they realise you're not very good at speaking their language, they just start speaking to you in English. And I remember that quite vividly happening once, where I tried to order a Coke or something, and they just started speaking to me in English. It must have been that bad. But I don't know whether it's because of that experience of moving around. I'm fairly good at picking up enough of a language to be able to kind of get by. So I went traveling for a year or so, and part of that was in South America, and I picked up enough Spanish that I could get by, and I hadn't learnt any before. But weirdly, or I think this might be the case, it might be completely inaccurate, sat on a boat in Brazil talking to a guy where he was obviously speaking Portuguese, I was speaking in Spanish, and we were having a discussion about how they used to dredge the Amazon to get gravel for the roads of the villages along the river. At least I think that's what we were talking about, but I couldn't say with any degree of certainty.
And so now, are you still peripatetic, or have you been settled in the same place for a long time?
Yeah, I've lived in Leeds for quite a long time now, since sort of university age. But I still haven't lived in the same house for a very long time. We've still moved around various areas of Leeds. I came to Leeds, so when my dad came out of the army, we moved back to his home town of, just outside a lovely place called Scunthorpe. And I went to secondary school there. I always remember when I first started, I thought, oh, this will be interesting, because I got to start at the same time all of the other children were moving up from sort of primary school up into secondary school. And that's when I got to start at the same time as them all. I thought, this will be great, because I won't be the odd one out. I won't be the person coming into the class. Everybody is coming in at the same time. And then the head of year coming in and standing me up and saying to everyone, this is Mark, he hasn't lived here before. You all have to be nice to him. I was like, oh, no. I did secondary school and sixth form college there. And then moved to Leeds for university, and been in Leeds for most of the time since, with a brief stint in Sheffield. If anyone asks now, I tend to either say I'm not really from anywhere, or I'm from Leeds, even though I didn't move here till my early 20s.
And so you said that the sort of your first flirtation with the hobby gaming world was when you were a teenager and you were playing GW stuff. So what kind of stuff did you play, and what was the attraction to that sort of scene? Yeah,
I think it was just a friend at school introduced me to it and kind of took me down. He went to a weekly club, and I just really enjoyed, these big kind of model things, doing crazy stuff on a table, and some of the nerdery that went with it. I think I enjoyed at the time, of getting little red rulers out and measuring how far things were, and the painting and all of this kind of stuff. It was mostly 40k that I was playing, some Necromunda as well. Was probably the most of it, but I used to love painting the models, and would do a lot of that and enter competitions until I kind of fell out of it at sort of college age, I think, and decided one day that I might go back to it. And so I had stored all the stuff in my dad's garage, only to learn that he'd accidentally thrown it all out, which was probably, I don't think he realised how much it probably all cost me. I was doing a job on a farm, one of my first jobs, working on a farm for £1 an hour. And I'd worked a 60-hour week, so I had £60 and spent it all on miniatures, on Games Workshop miniatures, which was about 2. And yeah, when I learned that he'd chucked away my huge Eldar army was my biggest army, and all these other models that I'd spent ages painting, it was pretty gutting. And then I never really went back to it after that.
And so you've never, in your reintroduction to games, you've never thought of flirting with GW stuff?
No, not since. I think because of the time commitment more than anything. Even just setting it up and putting the scenery out and getting a big table going, in that time, I could have probably played a couple of games of the kind of games that I play now. So.
And so you said that you went to college, and then you joined a heavy metal band, yeah. And it basically ruined your education. And why was that? And what did you do in the band? What was your role?
So I was a drummer, and it's actually, I'd been to college, I moved to Leeds for university, and I did my first year of university, and I had started my second year, but at the same time I was in the band, and the band was doing quite well. We were doing a couple of 100 gigs a year. So it's quite.
When you say quite well, did you have a record deal? Were you releasing stuff?
Yeah, and you can still find us on YouTube. We have a video, I think, that we did a long time ago.
How can people find it? What would they type in?
I'd rather they wouldn't, but
you didn't put the name in your interview notes, and I've been dying to watch this all day.
Yeah, so the band was actually called Fulk, and it's spelled Fulc. And it stood for something, and I don't know what it stood for. It was basically one of the guys was in a Quake clan, and it was the name of their Quake clan. They had a name for it, and I've no idea what it was. And I joined the band like a couple of years later.
And is Wasting the name of the song?
It is Wasting, yeah. So that's me sat behind the drums. We did all right. I always kind of maintain that if we'd managed to carry on for another year or so, we could have lived off it. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. But yeah, we released a few records. We did a tour of Germany, which was good fun.
And sort of. And so what was the touring life? Because we all have this picture, of it, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, what was it like? Was it just hard work and not enough sleep and that sort of thing?
Yeah, there was definitely some of that. I remember one place we turned up to, I think in Dresden, and all of the walls had been, for some reason, painted bright red, but not fully. So it just looked like blood dripping down all of the walls. And we all had to sleep in this one room on camp beds. And it was quite a strange experience. So none of us really slept that night. But it was very, very tiring to the point of, some of the guys were starting to almost hallucinate in weird ways, and you'd have kind of strange interactions with people on the street just because you were so tired you couldn't quite understand what they were trying to say to you. Because we were all working at, like I said, we weren't quite earning enough to live off it, but we were all kind of working, so we all had day jobs, and then we would drive somewhere crazy in the evening, do a gig, come back. I had a very strange experience once coming back from Scarborough, where we had opened a new club there, and then on the way back, everyone in the car fell asleep, which was not unusual. But I was driving, yeah, and I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. But I don't know if you know any of Aphex Twin. He's done an album that was really weird, where it's just kind of like sound effects and odd beats and stuff like that. And this album was on, and if anyone knows it, they might know what a strange experience I was having, as I'd taken this wrong turn into a village in the middle of nowhere in a car where I was the only one awake with this weird soundtrack, and they had a scarecrow festival on. So, all around the village were these kind of people in weird poses, not moving. And it was like, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, something is, I kind of had to stop and just wake myself up and make sure I hadn't fallen asleep. But yeah, so it was very, very tiring, but a lot of fun. And it was, just a lot of strange things that wouldn't happen in day-to-day life. I think that we just had a blast. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances of various different things all happening at the same time. I had to have an operation for a hernia. Two of the guys were having children at the same time with different people. And then, unfortunately, the singer at that time was having, not the singer, sorry, the guitarist was kind of really struggling with some of his mental health, and eventually committed suicide, which was very sad. And yeah, it just meant the end of everything, really.
So I want to move on now to your first game, and that's Brew Crafters. And I'm rather jealous because I've been wanting this game for years, and I've never managed to get a copy. But why are you taking this one to the cabin?
Yeah, so one of my other passions and one of my other hobbies is craft beer, and I think this game does a really good job of kind of cataloguing that. And if anyone's got a copy or seen a copy, it comes with just loads of tokens of little batches of beer that you can brew in the game. And I thought, well, firstly, it is definitely one of my favourite. This is one of my favourite games of all time, probably top 3, I'd say. But I think what I loved was, that I could use this game then as like some kind of cataloguing thing if I was ever able to get brewing going again following an apocalyptic event. But it's just a really good game, and one that I will always play. It's a huge table hog, so many bits to it. You have to spread all over the place. But yeah, just a really good game. A lot of people kind of compare it to something like Agricola or something like that, but just with a brewing theme instead.
And does it feel like you're doing what you're doing in the game?
Yes, to an extent. I would say it feels like you're a brewery manager rather than a brewer. So you kind of oversee the beer going through the different processes it needs to go through to become beer. But you don't. It's not like you're, throwing all the various ingredients into a kettle and boiling it up and actually making beer. It's like you're overseeing the process instead.
And I mean, so this game, as I said, I've been wanting a copy for years, but it's only really available in America. And it sort of made something of a fanfare when it first came out, but it's kind of not really spoken about anymore. Do you think it's a game people should play? And do you think that it would be more popular if people outside of America could get hold of it?
Yeah, I think so. Although, I think it was available for a while and it just wasn't getting the traction. I think maybe because it is such a, when you lay it all out, it is such a beast of a game. And it was probably at the time not too far behind Agricola being released, and I think maybe that's the one that caught people's attention instead. But I think for me, it's really good. Everyone I introduced it to has had a great time with it. And there's lots of different paths to victory, which I like. That you can do different things, or even if you do the same thing that won you the game one time, it's not necessarily going to work the same time, which I really appreciate in games. But yeah, it's definitely, if people can get hold of it, it's definitely one to check out.
So I want to move on now to your reintroduction to gaming, and then starting a convention for some reason. So what got you back into gaming? Was it a desire to do something that wasn't going to the pub?
Well, it was. I was completely unaware of the whole kind of hobby game movement that had been happening. As I said, I was still playing games at my mum's when I went back there for Christmas. And
when was this? What sort of year are we talking?
So it's probably 2013, 2012, 2013. So not too long ago. And my wife, she knew. Well, she wasn't my wife at the time, but as we were dating, and she'd come back to my mum's house and we'd crack some games out and play some games. She knew that I had this in me, but I don't think she realised the extent. And it was actually at a weekend away with some guys that one of them brought along a couple of games. I think they brought Catan and Carcassonne and Apples to Apples and a couple of other games. And I just really loved it. I loved that you could play this game that had at the time, compared to the other things that I was playing, just a depth to them, but were still only about an hour or so long. And I thought it was just really great. And so she hadn't quite realised that the geek that she was marrying at the time, and then it just I fell sort of head first into the hobby. Really, that was maybe summer of 2012, I guess, and then. I think the next summer, 2013, I went to my first Games Expo in Birmingham and just had such a brilliant time. A couple of years after that was I decided, I've been to Games Expo for a couple of years. What else should I go to? And started to have a look around at what else there was and found nothing really. So just decided, I said to my friend Ben that I worked with, shall we start something of our own? And he had been having similar thoughts. And so we just did, and we thought we'd have a go and see what happened.
But I mean, did you, because I got into gaming the same year, sort of 2012. And I think what really was a big thing for me is that I played these games and I thought, this is unlike anything that I've seen before with board games. These are actually sort of works of engineering that function without sort of rolling dice and moving. It was a real sort of eye-opener to me. Were there any games in that early period that sort of hit you and you thought, my God, this is something special?
Yeah, I think, like I said, those first couple, I'm not sure I could ever get that feeling again, even though it was only Catan and Carcassonne, which, if I look back, like, I still own both games and enjoy playing them, but I think it was that, especially Carcassonne, because where there's no dice, and pretty much every game I'd played up until that point had some kind of roll and move element to it, and it was just so mind-blowing that someone had thought of this game and how all the different bits work together, and actually the rules were fairly simple and fairly quick to pick up. And yeah, I think that was probably it, and so then I just started, as probably many people do, I was trying to watch everything the Dice Tower did at the time. There were, even back then, sort of board gaming media, there wasn't a lot of stuff to watch. So there was that. I think Watch It Played had recently started, so I was watching all of the stuff they were doing. There was another show called Game Night, which I think is still going on Board Game Geek. And I was using them as kind of reference materials and just looking at the games and kind of going, wow, and almost just getting everything that they were playing because it looked good, and I would have a go. And then very quickly came to realise that I couldn't just get everything. That was a silly way to do it. Yeah, so I think though, still looking back, it was probably those couple of games like Carcassonne and Catan. I think Trains at the time. I remember at that first expo playing Trains, and that was my first deck builder, I think. And yeah, just it's hard to remember. Kind of like I said, I was just went a bit mad for it. So it's hard to remember specifically like a lot of those games. I think probably I hardly own any of those games that I bought in that first year, apart from one or two, I think.
And so you had this idea to start a gaming convention. So what was that first Aire Con like? Where was it? How many people came? And obviously it's going to be much different to what it is today.
Yeah. So the first ever one was actually in my house. And this isn't the one that I'd gone to my friend Ben about. But the first event called Aire Con was in my house. My wife was away for like a hen-do weekend, as they've become now, abroad somewhere. And so I was at work one day and I thought, I'm going to hold a convention in my flat because that'll be a really good idea. And we had about 20 friends around over the weekend, and I'd looked at how other conventions got their name, and Gen Con is named after Lake Geneva, and I live in Aireborough with the River Aire going by us, so I thought Aire Con, that'll do. And then for some reason we decided to keep it when we decided to make it a public event. But I think there's still a lot. So when we went back then, we kind of thought, well, what do we like about going to conventions? And it's the opportunity to meet other people, to share the hobby, and to kind of play games. And so we said, right, we'll do a whole convention that is that. We haven't got the capital funds, we haven't got the investment to be able to go out and make a huge event straight away with loads of exhibitors. So we'll just make a convention that is focused on playing games, and that's what we did. I think the first one that we held publicly had about 100 people.
And where was it held? Was it held in a hotel? Was it held in like a community centre?
It was actually in a church, where it's sort of a modern church building, where we work. They have a big auditorium that they hired out to a church, so we couldn't do it on the Sunday. So the event was actually only Friday and Saturday, which was kind of funny. But yeah, we put on a bunch of events. We did like this communal curry where we ordered in a curry from a local takeaway, because it's a local curry house, because it was in Bradford. We thought that was a good thing to do, and they're well known for their curries in Bradford. So there was just a real nice kind of community family feel. Even though at 100 people, it was still you weren't going to say hello to everyone, but there was still something nice about it. And I think that's what we've always tried to maintain as we've grown, and we've seen that growth is as long as we're getting that feedback on the feedback forms that people came, they felt welcome, it was a relaxed atmosphere, that I think we're happy to keep growing until we sense that we might be losing some of that, I think.
And firstly, were you surprised that you got 100 people to your first one, and are you surprised now at the popularity of Aire Con as it stands? Yeah,
it is a little bit like the event has just grown and we're just trying to hold on in some ways. It definitely surprises the first few years, and particularly when we moved from Bradford, we moved into the Harrogate Convention Centre, and that was after the first couple. We realised there still at the time weren't many other events, so we thought, well, let's try again. We partnered up with a couple of other guys that run a small chain of board game shops in the north here, and they were happy to support us and see that move to the larger premises. And that was a big jump where we went. The first couple of Bradford events was 100 people, then 250, and then we moved to Harrogate and we saw about 650 people turning up. And yeah, that was really, really incredible. And we still take time at every event, Ben and I, to just meet in the halls and look at all the people playing games, because it's still, even though I think this latest event we had over 2,000, we still love that. We still love that we can see friendships being formed and people just having a great time playing games together. And I think that's what we would define our success.
So I want to go to your next game, and this is Codenames, which is, I guess, a modern classic. And so firstly, some people call this a party game. Do you see this as a party game?
I think it can be played as a party game. I think it can also be, whether you just define it as a word game or team game or something. I don't think it necessarily has to be a party game, but I think it can be. And I don't think everything has to be defined all the time to say it is this or isn't that. But yeah, it's a good fun game.
So I remember the first time I played it, because it had sort of debuted in its prototype form at the Gathering of Friends that year. And sort of everyone who went to the Gathering of Friends that year was talking about it. It says, you've got to play Vlaada Chvátil's new game, Codenames. It's absolutely incredible. And then I bought it at that year's Essen. And the minute I bought it, I thought, this is just astonishing. It's as good a game as I've ever played. Did you get the same feeling yourself when you played it?
Yeah, well, I heard the buzz and I was like, surely not, especially when you saw pictures of it and it's just words on cards. Like, surely it can't be that good. Like, why is everyone talking about it over all of these other big Euros and all these other big hits that were coming out at the time? And same sort of experience. I think I took it to a work. I used to run a board game club at lunchtimes at work, and yeah, I was just blown away. I was like, wow, this is just a really good time. And I loved the fact that people could wander in and out. It only took a couple of minutes to explain. And there's just so much versatility in the game, and just the situations it created, and, like the trying to figure out how people think, or, so you're not necessarily giving clues as you would give them. You're trying to give them as people would guess them, which I think just really changes it up. So yeah, definitely that first play, I was like, wow, it is a really good game, and sort of surprised by it.
And are you someone, have you witnessed classics coming out in your sort of gaming career, and do you see them as such? And are you sort of eager to play the classics?
Yeah, I think I'm probably not someone that's great at identifying them. Games that I like, I don't think necessarily always go on to be classics. And I probably don't like some of the more modern classics. But that's not necessarily, it's just the way it is, I think. It's a tough question. I think I'm excited just to play games and just to play new games. No matter if they're the latest hotness or if they've been out for 5 years and I've just never had a chance to play it. I just love learning new things and playing new games. So whether it's a classic or not, maybe doesn't bother me as much. But I'm not going to be down on a game just because it's popular. I think, there's this whole thing around games being overhyped and, too much buzz about this game or that game. And I think it's fine if people are excited about a game. Let them be excited about it, and I'll have a go. And if I enjoy it, I'll enjoy it, and that'll be great. And I'll get a copy for myself. And how do you feel about the other iterations of Codenames? Do you think the original is the best, or the pictures versions and all of that? Do you like that? Yeah, I've definitely. I think I still prefer the original with the words the best. I like pictures, and I like actually playing a mashup of the two, where you kind of do a grid where every other one is the other card, so it kind of makes a checkered effect. I haven't properly played Duet. I've seen a demo of it, but I think even that was in prototype form, wasn't quite finished. The others I'm not too bothered about, but I would play them if they were out, the kind of Marvel ones and the After Dark, or whatever it's called. Undercover, something like that, isn't it?
It's got the word bum in it. Very risque. So I want to move on now and take a diversion out of games into a subject I'm very interested in, but know nothing about really. So I want to pick your brains on the subject of craft beer. So firstly, there's a big if people don't know this, there's an organisation in Britain called CAMRA, which is the Campaign for Real Ale. And there's been something of a war going on between real ale people and craft beer people. For those who don't know, what is the difference between the two?
So certainly real ale, the kinds of beers that CAMRA would be promoting and would be defending, would be the traditional kind of brewed. It has to be in casks, not in kegs or not in bottles, and really what they mean by real ale is just it's using a the kind of an older way of brewing of using top fermenting yeast, so it's less carbonated usually. Do you think CAMRA are a bunch of reactionary snobs, or do you think they have a point? I think CAMRA has definitely done a lot for the industry over the years. I think, there was a real danger I think it's set up in the 60s, 70s, something like that, where, there was all these mega breweries coming out and just buying everything up and everything. I think at one point, 4/5 of all beer was brewed by 3 companies in the UK or something like that. So they did a really good job of kind of defending this kind of traditional way of brewing and all of these different styles and home brewing and all of this kind of stuff. But I think the limitations they put on themselves of what could be classed as ale or real ale has probably then limited them to a point now where it's maybe seen as quite a certain type of person that would be a CAMRA member, and I think if they've kind of lived through that, you could understand why they would defend it. But I think at the same time, they're now missing out on a bunch of really good beer.
And so why do you think there's been such a rise in the last sort of 5 years in craft beer? I mean, I live in Berlin, and when I arrived in Berlin, there was no craft beer. And now there's 20, 30 breweries in the city producing sort of, your IPAs, your imperial stouts, all of this sort of stuff. What is that down to, do you think?
I think it's just a general movement. I don't think it's specific to beer. I think for some reason it has worked particularly well in beer, perhaps because of that thing of there was literally all beer tasted the same at one point from any, the major breweries. It was all this kind of quite insipid lager. But I think, we've seen it in coffee and we've seen it in bread and all of the oil and gin and all of these different things, where people are just, kind of rediscovering them, I suppose. But it's still a tiny percentage of the overall market would be classed as craft. Even though there's bars dedicated to it and all of this kind of stuff, it's still a very small amount of what is actually brewed in the world. But I think just people experiencing what can be done with a few simple ingredients, it's only really 4 usually in a beer, but just the amount of variety you can get with just treating it a slightly different way, or even where it's brewed. So Yorkshire has a high concentration of breweries because the water, which you can't really move around very easily around the country. So I think it's just people kind of wanting to try new things, and I still even wonder whether there's a bit of a return to kind of tribalism, and maybe that's what we experience with our hobbies, with like board games and things like that, is people like being part of something and being able to chat to other people about this thing and discovering other people that love this thing as much as they do. And so I think that's probably what we've seen with something like craft brewery.
So what does craft beer give us that, your standard sort of Carling, Stella Artois doesn't?
Yeah, I think, it's the reason why is it being brewed in the first place. So something like Carling, Stella, any of those kinds of beers are being brewed to make money, and that's what it comes down to. So they will do as much as they can to keep the taste the same with but spend less money. And what we see over the years is those kinds of breweries making these super cold versions of beers and things like that, and that's actually to make it taste more and more like water. So, and they're actually aiming for that, and people joke about it, but the more it tastes like water and the less you can actually taste of the beer, the more refreshing it's going to feel. And that's kind of how beer has been associated over the years, is it's a refreshing drink, which is why it also has a really bad reputation if it gets warm, because once it gets warm, you can actually taste it, and then you realise that a pint of Stella is actually disgusting. But I think in the craft beer movement, you've got people that are, whilst they maybe need to make money to if they want to do it professionally, that's not usually their main objective. They probably want to do it because they have a love of it, and they want to show that, and they want to explore things and experiment with things. And often it means they end up having to chuck a whole brew away, which is really sad. But if it's not worked because they've tried an experiment, they're not going to put it out there, because there's a reputation attached where certain breweries are going to be good, and other ones are not.
So if I were new to craft beer, what should I start with? What would be a good entrance into that world?
So I would maybe, even after saying everything I've said, I'd go for a lager and just go find a local craft beer bar and just ask them for a good lager, because there is really good lager out there, and Germany makes some of the finest because of the purity laws they've had over the years. But on from that, just sort of taking it easy. It's, again, similar to board gaming. If someone was new, you wouldn't hit them with the heaviest, most complex thing that you could find and go, this is the best that there has ever been, because someone will just taste it and go, no, that's disgusting. Because you need that kind of time to acclimatize, I suppose, which is important. So, but there's so much out there, and I think if you have a good local craft beer bar, I would just go in and what we used to do in the bar that I used to run was just ask people what they liked. What kind of flavors do you like? What appeals to you? And we will find something that matches that. What's
your preference? What kind of beers do you drink?
This would be very dependent on lots of things. Again, it's a lot of comparisons to board gaming here, but it would depend on the people I'm with, the situation it is, even the location I'm at. Usually, I'm always up for a wheat beer. I love wheat beer, which is a very German thing. Belgian kind of Trappist beers are usually very good. But it'd be a lot of different things. If I'm going to a beer festival, there's a really good one here in Leeds, I'll try about 20 or 30 different beers, but only have a small taste of each one in an evening. Because again, I like variety. I like trying just lots of new things.
So your next game then is Takenoko. How much do you think the success of this game is down to the game itself, and how much do you think it's the cute panda?
I think the cute panda certainly helps. And this would be, as we spoke about at the start, this would probably be a game that's made it into the cabin for sentimental reasons. And so this was the first game that my wife bought me as a gift, which was, quite a big occasion at the time. But yeah, I think there's a good game there, and I think it's a great one to introduce to new people. And I think the look of it certainly helps, having the cute panda and having the kind of slightly quirky theme. Really helps it, but it's just a really simple game to explain to people, and I've had a lot of enjoyment out of the game.
So there's always a debate that rages a lot. It's sort of considered gauche even to say that you consider components important to your gameplay experience. I mean, how important are components to you, or can you live with rubbish components if the game is great?
No, I think components are important. Similarly to how I said I like the artwork, and I like the graphic design. I think the components, they're part of the finished product for me. And if they are good, I will really enjoy that. But that's not to say, unfortunately, I wouldn't go as far as saying like minis games I'm not particularly into, but that's more because I don't really paint anymore. So I prefer not to have a grey blob on my board, and I'd prefer to have standees or something like that. But yeah, I think, what's the heart, especially now with so many games being released every year, more than anyone could ever play, why not make it look good? Why not make that experience better for people if you can, I think.
And do you think this is Antoine Bowser's best game?
Certainly up there. I would say, for me, probably between this and Seven Wonders. I wasn't a massive fan of Takedo. I've never played Ghost Stories, which I know is another one that people rate very highly.
I'm the only person in the world who hates that game.
Oh, do you? I've never played it.
I'm not a big fan.
It's more the theme for that doesn't really appeal to me. It's not the kind of the thing I'm into. But yeah, it's definitely, I think it's so accessible. Even if I was playing this at work, where I currently work with about 300 people, if I was playing this, it would certainly draw people over and they would want to know about it. And I think that's great for a game, to draw people that don't know about it in. And like I say, I think the components, the look, the big tall towers of bamboo is just going to aid all of that.
So I want to talk now about you with your convention organizer hat on. So if people were planning to start their own convention, what would be some good general advice you'd give them to make sure it's as painless as possible?
Yeah, well, as painless as possible. Yeah, I think it would be just to start by going to other conventions and going to as many local game groups as you can, and just trying to find out what might be missing from whatever location you're in, or what people want. And that's what we did that massively helped us, and we still do, is just listen to people about what they actually want, what they liked, what they don't like, things like that. And so certainly going to conventions, because it was going to Games Expo that helped us realise that the thing that we really enjoyed was meeting other people and playing games with them. And then it was that same year, I think, I went to Essen, which made me realise I didn't want to just make a big shop, because whilst I was amazed by the spectacle of it and this, this huge event with hundreds of thousands of people there, I was quite miserable because I found it really hard to meet other people and play games. And I would go and ask for demos, but because I was by myself, people would say, well, we'll have to wait for someone else to come along. And inevitably they wouldn't, so I'd just wander off. And so it's kind of funny. So that showed us that we definitely didn't want to do that. And I think just figuring out very early on what it is you want to do and what it is you want to get out of it. I think I do a lot of project management, and I think that thing of the project management triangle of money, time, and quality, and you can only pick two of them. For us, it was the money that we didn't have a lot of, but we knew we wanted to make a quality event, so we knew we had to put a lot of time into it, and which is what we've done. It is very much like a second full-time job for us all. Yeah.
And so what did you do well with the convention, when you started it, and what mistakes did you make, and what would you warn people against?
I think what worked well for us certainly was we almost treated it as though it was a bigger event than it was. We kind of treated it as though it was an event for 2,000 or 3,000 people, even though we knew only 100 people were coming. And so we put all of our efforts and set our sights on that. And so we made sure the signage was great. We made sure it was branded well. We made sure there were good events on and things like that for the convention of its size. And I think that worked well. And we've always tried to kind of do that. And we're very fortunate now to have a lot more people helping us. It's not just Ben and I anymore, that we can give some of that stuff to. But we still want to make it that really great experience for people, and we feel a certain amount of responsibility that people are paying us to have a good time. So we want to make sure that they're going to have a good time and have the options for that. In terms of my mistakes, I think just it's kind of the flip side of that same coin of just not trying to take too much on yourselves. I think people can quickly get burnt out, or because you're trying to do too much, you don't do it well, or you're not able to do it to a standard as good as you would have liked. So yeah, and it can just affect the experience for people. You know, there were certain things that we had to learn from very, very quickly, that things weren't working. Thankfully, because we had started with that smaller event, it meant that we could learn very quickly. And because of where we had put our efforts, people still had a good time and they wanted to come back to the next one and could kind of forgive those mistakes. And like, as I said, that's what we continue to do now. We send out a big survey almost immediately after the event's closed, just asking people, what did you like? What could we do better? And we listen to it and we try and implement as much of it as we can. Obviously, as we get bigger, some of it can be contradictory, so we just have to go with what we think.
And so I guess the most important question that people will be thinking is, can you make money doing it? Or is it always going to be a labour of love?
Yeah, I think you can. We are not in that place yet. We're not losing money, which is good. We make a very small amount of money, which pretty much all of that just goes straight back into the convention. So this was our 5th public event that we just did, and we've probably made just enough to kind of fund a trip to Essen for a couple of us. But it's not something that we're taking a salary from or making any large amounts of money from. But I think the thing with kind of events like this is that there's a certain tipping point where sort of the amount it costs you per person that's in the room actually goes down and down and down. But the amount you can charge per person, without wanting to get too capitalist about it all, but the amount you can charge per person actually goes up. And so there's kind of a point at one, if you want to keep going to that point, where you'll suddenly make money and you'll suddenly make enough that you can pay yourself a wage and do it as a proper job. But it just takes time and a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifice. My gaming time is very minimal now. And
I guess one thing is, when you run a convention, you don't get to play games, right?
Yeah, definitely not. I played 2 games at the most recent event. They were both 5-minute games, both very quick filler games. One of them was a prototype that someone had asked me to play. So yeah, although we started the event because we wanted more places to play games, we very rarely actually play any games. Yeah, so I don't want to speak for them, but I know the Games Expo guys, it probably took them 10 or 11 years, I think, before they could actually be employed by the event. So it just does take time, and it's certainly not a place to go if you're looking to make a quick buck.
So your next game is something of a deep cut, and this is Sunrise City. And I remember when this came out, and a lot of people were talking about it, a lot of people were playing it, and then it sort of dropped off the radar. Why do you think that is?
I think, yeah, I really don't know, because it's a really fun game. It's very simple. It's quite a gateway game. For me, the main reason I thought of bringing it into the cabin was because of the huge tiles that you could burn for fuel. But it's a neat game. It's got really simple mechanics and again, it's a game that just looks really nice. I don't know whether it was because of the mismatch of the amount of stuff that came in the box, but so literally the physical weight of the game versus the gameplay weight of the game. Maybe there was a mismatch there, so people kind of went in expecting something quite grandiose, but when they got to playing it, it was like, oh, actually, it's a fairly straightforward tile laying game. But for me, it looks great. I have a lot of fun with it, and the expansion. There's a little expansion as well that adds another dimension to it that I think people should give it a chance.
Why? So you said you were taking it because of the tiles, but is there another reason you're taking it to the cabin?
No, I think probably it. No, I think there's more to it than you first appear. So I think the people that maybe did sort of write it off, it is because unfortunately it's not one of those games where at first there seems like there's much strategy or much deep thinking, but I think it is one that rewards multiple plays, which I think a lot of people probably don't have time for. I think a game has to hit within the first couple of plays for people to really go for it, and those games that do take a little little while longer to sort of reveal themselves. I don't think they gain as much traction as quickly.
I mean, are you someone who gives games a chance, or are you someone who writes them off pretty quickly?
It would depend on the game, and as we already kind of spoke about, if it was a game that looks nice, I'm going to give it more of a chance because I want it to be really good because I like things that look nice. Which is maybe what happened with Sunrise City, because for me, I think it looks really, really cool. But in general, yeah, unfortunately, I think there probably does have to be enough for me, even in those first couple of plays, for me to hang on to it, or at least something different about it. I think, there's been plenty of games that have come out that, as we spoke about, that would now maybe be considered classics, but for me, they probably didn't grab me on the first couple of plays, so I didn't bother. Something like Azul or Sagrada, I already had Blueprints, which I think is way better. So I'm not going to be someone that has multiple copies of the same types of games, I think. I like variety.
So I want to talk now about the future. So what's the future for Aire Con? You've spoken that, you talked about the UK Games Expo people and how they're able to now employ themselves. Is that a goal for you at some point, to be employed by Aire Con and make that your full-time profession?
It's hard to say. I think it's actually quite rare for people that run an event to be employed full-time, certainly like Tony and Richard at the Games Expo. I think usually it's more done on kind of a temporary basis where you get a certain amount of income from this event, but it's only for a few months of the year. But I don't know that we would ever get to that size, to be honest. I think the way we've gone is, in the early days, in the first few events, people maybe would say, oh, it's just like a very small Games Expo. But I think now we've gone off on enough of a different tangent that we're very much seen as a different event, where it is much more about playing games. And I just don't know. I think if we ended up getting to those kind of larger numbers where we were welcoming people in tens of thousands, I think it would be hard to maintain that same atmosphere which is what we're going for. And so it might just be that it does stay as a passion thing. And when we decide that actually it's taking up too much of our time outside of our jobs, then maybe we kind of halt the growth at that sort of point. Or if we feel like we're compromising on, if we're hearing stories of people coming and not being able to find games or not being able to get into play with others, then I think that's where we'd probably look at it. Like I said, it'd be nice if it funded some other things, like going to Essen or going to Gen Con or something like that. But I'm not sure that it'll get to the point where we're living off it.
And so, where does it stop? Have you discussed this? Have you had a number in mind? 'Cause you said you had 2,000, which is still small, but it's beginning to get into the area of big. Where does it stop, do you think?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, because you look at Board Game Geek Con, I think they get 3,000 or 4,000 unique attendees, and people are still saying the same things about that convention. So I think there's definitely still some way that we could go, and I think we're very fortunate in the venue that we have. It has quite a lot of space, but the way the space is organised, you never feel like you're in the big kind of NEC type venue where it's just miles and you can't see the other end of the room. So I think we still have a way to go. We did some calculations where we think we could get up to 10,000 in that venue if we wanted to, but I think we would just have to keep taking a view. And like we will always put the gaming and the gamer first, and so whenever we do hall plans, we always put in all the gaming space first and then fit in the traders and the events and stuff around that. And I think as long as we keep doing that, I think we'll be okay. And just like, as I said, just listen to that feedback, which is so vital for us, to know that people are having a fun time. So
I also mentioned at the top of the show that you just got a new job, and this is in the board game world, and this is working for Hush Hush, who published Fog of Love. Is this something of an ambition achieved for you, working full-time in the board gaming world, or is it a surprise you never expected to be there?
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise. It was more that I sort of spoke to a friend at the time who already works in the industry, and I just sort of put feelers out. He put me in touch with the guys at Hush Hush, and it was, that was the only job I had applied for. I wasn't going out looking desperate to get into the industry, and it just happened to work for both of us. So it was really exciting, and it's, the role I'm very much looking forward to in terms of is kind of global supply chain work. So a lot of logistics and strategy and organization and that kind of stuff, which I love. So yeah, it's very exciting. It's all still very new, so it's still working out details. But yeah, I don't think I had never purposely gone to go and get a job in the board gaming community, or in the board gaming industry, sorry. But I'm really looking forward to it. And I think there's, so I think some people don't like mixing their passions with their work, and they get, a bit irritated if they have to get paid for something that they love doing, but other people really like that aspect. But I think for me, it's, it was the role that appealed to me, and it was a bonus that it was in board gaming, something that I don't have to go and learn loads about like you might do with another new job. I already know, a fair amount. So, and I enjoy learning that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely very exciting, and I look forward to seeing what's going to happen with it.
And so if you were to sell Aire Con to the people listening to this, what would you say? What is the unique selling point for Aire Con?
Yeah, it's definitely that thing around just if you like playing games, which sounds really silly when you talk about a convention, but it is that. It's hard to really show that in any way, or kind of explain that, why that is. But there's definitely a unique atmosphere that I found, and we hear from our attendees that they've made friends there that they've now, a few years later are still friends with, and it might be Aire Con that is the thing that they see each other at each year. And I think somehow it's a lot to do with the people that come, that there's just been an environment of that kind of welcoming nature. We do a lot of things to try and help people get into games, but it's still, the attendees still seem to really just run with that. And I don't know whether because of those things it's attracted a certain type of person. But we have, and the response is always great. We inevitably get the questions on our Facebook group and about, I'm going to be coming by myself. Am I just going to be wandering around the halls bored for 3 days? And it's just, person after person saying, no, you will get a game, and giving tips, obviously, come to this event, do this, do that. You will meet people, you will get to play games. And I think that's what's really great. And it's kind of all the most positive things about the hobby from my point of view, around that inclusive nature and that kind of just getting social with people. And I think we've managed to capture it somehow in a big hall in Harrogate, and people just come and have a great time, and we love that. And yeah, I think that's what's unique, is just everything is fun. That's our motivation, is the pursuit of fun, I think.
Brilliant. So your last game is Bruges. And so you said you don't follow designers, but are you a fan of Stefan Feld, or is this one of the few games of his that you sort of really connect with?
Yeah, so again, I didn't get this because it was a Feld game. I actually, again, went after it because Bruges is a place I love, and I have been to every year for the last 4 years, I think, maybe 5 years. We go over on the ferry.
Have you seen Jesus' Blood?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
That's one of the big things in Bruges. I saw it. I went there 2 years ago. They've got a vial, apparently, of Jesus' blood, and you walk up and you look at it, and then you walk out.
Yeah, so I go for quite different reasons, because of the beer, mostly, because it's really good. And so we've done some of the touristy stuff, been up the Belfort and wandered the streets and all the things that you do. But it's, what I like is some of it is the familiarity. As much as I like new stuff and I like trying new things, I like just being in such a nice atmosphere there. So I saw, when I first became aware of the game Bruges, I was like, oh, I'll try and find a copy, and of course it's really, really hard to get hold of. In terms of Stefan Feld, I think my first game that I played of his was the Oracle of Delphi, and I really didn't like it. I really wasn't a fan. It felt like I was playing lots of little games all over the place, and they never really seemed to come together for me. But then I played Castle of Burgundy. I really enjoyed that one, and I think they're the only 3 I've played of his. So wouldn't say I'm a Feld fanatic or anything, but I would certainly play others of his games. But as I said, I don't really go after particular designers. There's not a particular designer that I would go hunting out. So yeah.
So if you were to rank yourself as any kind of gamer, what kind of gamer would you call yourself?
I would probably be in the kind of mid-weight Euro kind of area, but with this stipulation that they kind of have to look nice as well. And again, Bruges is one that it would be that the game is fantastic and I love it, but it's also that kind of the sentimental kind of just reminding me of good times of going to a place that I really loved, I think. So I've got quite a few games of places I've been to, I think I mentioned earlier, but that's one that, would be out of all of those. It's a really good game and it reminds me of a place that I really like going to.
So one last question then. You're herring out to Otley, to your cabin in the country, and you're driving 88 miles an hour and you go around a corner and the back seat of the back door of the car flies open and 4 of the games fly out down a ravine into a river and are swept away forever. Which game do you hope is sitting on the back seat of the car?
So I thought the decision would be easy, but when it came to it, it was really between 2. It was between Bruges and Brew Crafters, and I think it would be Brew Crafters that I would hang on to, just because there's so much replayability in the game. It has that kind of longevity and that kind of that it intersects 2 of my favourite things. So I think it would be Brew Crafters that I would hope was still there.
So if people want to get hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
You can go on the website, which is Airecon with an E in the middle, so airecon.uk. You can email us hello@airecon.uk. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all Airecon UK, or just Google Aire-Con.
Fantastic. Well, Mark Cooke, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you want to suggest a guest, or you want to say something nice about the show, or if you want to say something horrible about the show, you can contact me on @5gamesfordoomsday on Twitter, or you can send me an email at 5gamesfordoomsday@gmail.com. You can give a rolling donation to help support the show at patreon.com/5G4D, or a one-time PayPal donation at the bottom of the website 5gamesfordoomsday.com. And if you fancy looking swanky, you can buy a t-shirt at tpublic.com/user/5gamesfordoomsday. And if I haven't had to bolt from the monkeys with typewriters and the world thumb wrestling champion, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another 5 Games for Doomsday.